This is Algebra 1, Lesson 28A, Fractional Parts of Numbers. We're going to do examples 28.1 through 28.3. I threw in my own example at the beginning. This is something you're probably familiar with. If I said half of 50, what number would you think of? Would you think of 25? So how did you know that? Well, you probably said 50 divided by 2, and you know the answer to that is 25. Okay? Or you could have thought half of 50, and then you could have written that as a fraction and canceled. And then you would end up with 25 over 1 or 25. However, how you did it, you came up with 25. You may have just known that, okay? The example or the lesson that they're going to be talking about is how to write these with numbers. And then if it's given with numbers, how to write it with words and to be able to use that to help you know how to do the problem. So here they would say half of means to multiply. We know the number 50. Is means equals. And then we know the answer is 25. Okay? Now that's kind of a prerequisite skill. They're going to go into something a little more here in just a second. This is the first example that's in the textbook. 7/8 times 48 is equal to 42. Now, you could also think of it in words as 7/8 of 48 is 42. So when you see the of or the multiply, you think of and vice versa. When you see the equal sign, you think is, vice versa. Okay? All right, so let's look at the first real example in the book where they ask you to do it. And that is example 28.1. 3/4 of what number is 69? We're just going to write 3/4. We know that of means we're going to multiply. What number? We could use any variable we wanted. The book uses WN. And the reason they use WN is because they are trying to show that that stands for what number. Now, the difficulty is that looks like W times N. So if you did Saxon 8/7, you did it like this with the little n, a subscript. And that's how I'm going to write it to avoid the confusion of looking like it's W times N. Okay, so the what number is represented by the WN. And then the is equal, and then 69. And then we can work that problem out. That's just a regular equation. They're multiplying by 3/4, and we really want to get rid of this because we want just our variable on that side. So to get rid of it, we could divide by it, or look, we could multiply both sides by its reciprocal. Often that's an easier way of doing it because look what happens. It's going to cancel. What number is, and then we're going to do 69 over 1, so it's a fraction, and 4/3. We can cancel the 3 here, and then how many 3's are in 69? Would that be 23? And then we can multiply the 23 times the 4, and we get 92. So what number is 92? So 3/4 of 92 is 69. Now I want to show you something else. They don't show this in the lesson, but you've probably had this before. Let's check it. 3/4 of 92. Well, if you're finding a fraction of a number, which is what we have here, we're dividing by 4 and then we're multiplying by 3. So you can do that all in one step, right? Just put the 92 over 1 and then multiply. Sorry, there we go. But you could also break it up and go ahead and do the division by 4. So do 92 divided by 4. We get 23. And then multiply it by 3. So we're always dividing by the denominator and we're multiplying by the numerator. If you want to break it up into 2 steps, when you multiply by a fraction. And here that would help us check it. 23 times 3 is 69, and that's what we were supposed to get. So we know that the number is indeed 92. 28(2). What fraction? Now, when they have what number, they use WN. When they have what fraction, they use WF. And I'm going to use the subscript F. What fraction of, we know is multiply, 40 is 24. So we're multiplying by 40, and we can get that variable by itself if we divide both sides by 40 or multiply by the reciprocal if you wanted to. I think here, since we're going to get the fraction, this seems to be the easiest way. Now, this won't divide evenly. It is going to end up being a fraction, so let's just write it as a fraction. But we know that fractions need to be simplified. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 4. I think there's a bigger number. We'll start with 4. 6/10. Let's divide it by 2. 3/5. So our answer for what fraction of 40 is 24 is 3/5. So if you did 3/5 of 40, 3/5 of 40, divide it by 5 and you get 8, multiply that by 3 and you get 24, and now I know that that's the correct answer. 28(3). Now this is a little different because they're giving us a mixed number. 2.5 of is multiply, 240 is what number? So I can just multiply those two, and I could change that to a decimal if I wanted to, 2.5, or I could do it as a improper fraction. So that would be 5/2. The 2 times the 2 is 4 plus the 1 is 5, right? So 5/2 times 240, we write it as a fraction, so it's over 1, and that's equal to the what number? And I can cancel. And then I can multiply straight across, and I get, what is that, 600 equals what number? So that is the answer to this example. And then you could really just checking it is multiplying that one again, or you could work it backwards.